All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this graph over here in order to do what it asked me to do for my function. So it asked me to find f of 2, which means which graph am I looking at? The f function, right? The f of x graph. And what value is this 2 going to replace? Is your x value. So really what this is asking me to do is look at my graph where x equals 2 and find out what my y value is. So if you come over here and you look at the functions, the f of x is the straight line, the g of x is the curved line. And which one was I asked to look at? The f of x, right? So I'm going to come on the x-axis to 2. I'm going to find that value up here on my f function, which is right there. And what would my y value be at that point? It's 5. Good. So f of 2 over here on number 1 would be the value of 5. Does that make sense where we went and found that at? All right, the next one then asks you to find g of 2. So which function am I looking at this time? I'm looking at g. And what's my x value I'm looking at? I'm looking at 2. So come back over here. We're looking at our g function, which is this curve this time. We're going over to 2, and we're going to go up and find that value on the curve. And what's the value at? 4. So my answer is 4. Now, the next part over here asks you to do f plus g of 2. Well, what was f of 2? It was 5. What was g of 2? It was 4. So what's f plus g of 2? It would be 9. Did you see how simple that was? Okay, so what if we were going to graph the new function of those two put together? I would graph the ordered pair 2, 9 if we were adding them together. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so back to another example. We're finding f of 1 on that same set of graphs. So I'm looking at my f graph, and am I finding my value where x is 1? So x is 1. Find it on your f graph, and what's your y value? 3. Okay, so f of 1 is 3. Now we're finding g of 1. So come over on your graph and find g of 1. So look at the value of 1, find it on your g graph, and what is it at? 2. So then if I ask you f plus g at 1, I have f at 1, which is 3. I have g at 1, which is 2. So what's f plus g added together? It would be 5. Okay. So it says f plus g at 1, that answer would be 5. Okay. The next one says, using the graphs up above, graph what it might look like if we added f of x plus g of x together. Okay. So tell me this. When I just did this up above, when we found f plus g of 2, I got 9 out, right? So when I put 2 in, I got 9 out. So that was one of my ordered pairs from adding the two graphs together. Do you guys agree with me on that from using our other information? What's the other ordered pair that we already found from our up above stuff? Yeah, when we put 1 in, we got 5 out when we added the two graphs together. So we put 1 in and 5 out. Okay, so we have two ordered pairs that we can graph there already. We can go 2, 9. And we can go 1, 5. And then we maybe could guess what it's going to look like right there. Think about it for just a minute. What do you think it's going to look like if I add a line and a curve together? Do you think it's going to be a line or a curve, or like if you add two things together, shouldn't it be a combination of the two things? What it should look like, right? So do you think we're probably going to get something that looks really close to a line but really has a curve to it maybe? Because of the way that these two look. So I'm not 100% sure what I think this is going. So maybe we could do one more spot over here to find out where my ordered pairs are. So do you guys want to pick -1 or do you want to pick -2? What do you want to pick so we can see where we're going?
-2.
Let's pick -2. Okay, so let's say this. I need to add my two graphs together over here. So if I go over to -2, then on G I'm right here, and if I'm over at -2, if I extended this down, then I'm kind of like right here, okay? Now we're going to have to guess values on both of those, right? Because they're not perfect. But again, it just kind of gives me an idea of where my next ordered pair would be at. So let's say this is like, how far up do you think we are? Like 0.25 maybe? And how far down do you think we are right here? Maybe -3 if we were just guessing. So if we added those two values together, we'd be at -2.75. So on our new graph, if we're over at -2, we're probably down almost 3. Okay? That, and I just went and graphed that because we decided that if we were over at -2, then we had a -3 and a plus 0.25, which would give us a -2.75. Is anybody wondering where I got that from? Everybody's okay? So I graphed that ordered pair. And then can you see what this looks like a little bit better? That's definitely a curve, not a line, huh? When you only do 2 points, you don't know if it's a curve or a line because you can't tell by looking at it. That third point definitely added me enough to my graph that I could sketch it really fast to know what those two graphs added together would look like. So this is what we're doing today. We're finding points that they share in common, and we're either adding them or subtracting them together to find a new graph. So we're combining two graphs into one. Does that kind of make sense? All right, so here we go down here on number 8. This time it asks us to find f of x plus g of x using these two graphs below. So let's talk about it for just a minute. If I start out with two lines, what do you think adding them together is going to end up with? Probably a line, right? If you add two lines together, shouldn't you end up with a line still probably? So we should be looking for a line here. So what we're going to do is we're going to find some ordered pairs on our new line. So let's say that I pick 0 for my ordered pair. If I put 0 in as my x value, I'm going to find it on the f of x graph, and I'm going to find it on the g of x graph, and I'm going to add those two values together. Okay? So at 0 right here, what's my value on the f of x graph? It's up at 2, right? And at 0, what's my value on the g of x graph? 4. So what's my new ordered pair for my new graph going to be? 0, 6, right? So I would start at 0, I would be up at 6 for my new ordered pair on my graph. Now we know this is going to be a line, so we really only need to do it one more time, right? Because you only need 2 points to write a line. Although it would be more accurate if we did 3. But let's decide another spot we're going to pick. What other x value do you want to look at? It's kind of hard to see because we're kind of off the graph in some places. How about -1? Can we look at -1? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, if I look at -1 on the f graph, so here's -1, go down and find it on f. Where are we at down there? Yeah, we're at -4. Then we're going to go find it on the g graph. So where are we at? If we're at -1, how high are we on the g graph? We're up at 3. What's -4 plus 3? -1. So what's my new ordered pair? When I put -1 in, I got -1 out. So I'm at -1, -1. So these two lines, if I were to add them together, they end up being this line instead. Okay? So somebody talk me through what I just did there. How did I figure out where my new line was going to be? I picked an x value. Then what did I do with it? I found them on both lines and added their y values together, right? Did I change the x value at all? No, keep the x value the same, just add the y values together. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so same thing here, but this time what am I asking you to do? Subtract them, okay? And does subtraction matter on the order? Yeah, it does. So I have to make sure I look at the F graph first and then the G graph, okay? So I kind of like to make that table again so I remember what I'm doing. I'm picking an x value, then I'm going to do f of x minus g of x, and then I like to just write my new ordered pair in like a third column over there. So any x value you want that looks like we might be able to find it on our two graphs. What x value do you want to pick? 0. I love 0. I always pick 0. Okay, so which graph do I have to do first? Anybody remember? The F, right? So look at the F graph, which is this one, and where does it, how high is it if you're at x equals 0? 0, right? All right, now do the same thing on the G graph. At 0, how high are you on the y-axis? You're up at 4. So my new ordered pair, when I put 0 in, what did I get out? -4. So my new ordered pair is 0, -4. So down here for my first spot. Okay. Now we started with a line and we're subtracting a line, so we should end up with a line, right? Two lines added or subtracted together are going to give us a line still. The only time we're going to get a curve is if one of them starts out as a curve. So I need to pick at least one more ordered pair so that I can figure out where another point is on my line. -1? Okay, let's look at -1. We have to look at our f function first, so this one. If we're over at -1, where are we at on our f graph? At -1 down, okay? I have to subtract because that's what I was asked to do. So then I'm going to go to -1 and find that value on my G graph. It's up here at 2. So I would have -1 minus 2, which... Okay, if I'm looking at -1 right here on my F graph, oh, did I do it backwards? Yeah. I did it backwards, you guys. Thanks for checking on me. Okay, so when I did -1 here on my F graph, it should have been 2. Thank you. And then I would have subtracted off my G graph, which is -1. So subtract off, and oh my gosh, that's a mess. Can I write it right here? Is that okay with everybody? So what do I really get this time? If I put in -1, what did I get out? What's 2 minus a -1? 3. So my ordered pair is -1, 3. So we're coming through like that. Let's do one more ordered pair because I did that last one in the wrong order, okay? So pick me a value, maybe... You want to go -2? Okay, if I check -2, I have to start with my F graph first, which is this one, right? Everybody check me on that. So at -2, I'm up here at 4 on my F graph. And then at -2, I'm going to find it on my G graph, which would be down at -6. So I'd have 4 minus a -6, which would be 10. So over at -2, I would be up at 10, which is off my graph. And my line would go through those ordered pairs that I find for my new graph.